Hi, I'm Scott. I'm not feeling well, but that's not why I'm sick to my stomach.
And I'm Mark, and I'm not feeling any better.
Okay, so this is Church is Lame, and we talk about how church is breaking America and how America has broken the church. So we have a lot to talk about today. Unless your head has been hiding under a rock for several days now, hopefully you've heard the story that American administration officials, words is hard, have been caught talking about a classified military strike using the Signal app and including a media reporter. Oops.
Yeah, it's just like the rank incompetence of the whole thing.
Yeah. Like we keep talking about like four-dimensional chess. These people are geniuses operating at another level. They're children. They're children who think they're above the rules. On the one hand, they're gonna like, oh, her emails, classified materials cannot be mishandled under any circumstances. And here they are talking about classified military operations under an app that's well known to be monitored by foreign governments.
Yeah, and of course, they're talking about taking combat actions against another country,
Yeah,
which is just Jesus would do that, right?
yeah, yes. That's exactly what the Bible preaches. Yeah, when they slap you on the one cheek, carpet bomb them.
Yeah,
Yeah. So the reason that I bring this up is I was in those churches when the Hillary Benghazi, her email stuff all happened. I
Mhm.
was there when they said that this is automatically disqualifying. This is not just about laws, but this is about morals. This is about ethics. This is about judgment. This is about, oh, what's that word? Whether women have the right disposition to be president. This is
Yeah,
about all those things. And it's certainly all biblically based. It's like why is it that there's only condemnation for our enemies and there's always grace for the people we like at all levels, whether it be spiritual or governmental or personal or whatever? It's always that way.
yeah. I mean, it just to me it feels like nothing but tribalism, and it's not meant to criticize even these people in particular, because I think we are all prone to the tribalistic thinking.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, if my tribe does it, yeah, it's super easy for me to show Christian grace. But when the other side does it, then it's because they're evil and wicked and they must be punished.
yeah,
And that's just also not a Christian view of the world, or more point, that's not the view of the world that Jesus taught us to have.
right. It's almost as if these politicians really aren't that spiritual. It's almost as if they don't care about what the Bible says or have a personal relationship with Jesus. It's almost like they're using Christians for their votes and to build their power base more than anything else.
Yeah, because when we think about like if there's a state religion, right,
Yeah,
then there is generally some sort of social benefit for like you or me or anybody, like just to say, oh yeah, I'm part of the state church,
yeah,
I'm recognized as one of the true believers. Um, but yeah, it's like with a lot of the politicians that they claim Christianity, but yeah, then they really do not seem to demonstrate those principles. There's something else going on, and it's the way I can understand it best is that it's a political identity and not a faith identity.
right.
And like this kind of thing just runs afoul of that, because like I've heard podcasts where you have you know politically conservative pastors talking about these same issues, but they're not talking about them in the same language that you hear politicians or um you know the the book burning kinds of Christians talking about this stuff.
Right. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if anyone is held accountable. And it'll be more interesting or less interesting to watch as the church sits by and does nothing and says nothing about it.
Yeah, and earlier today I saw a clip of Mike Johnson talking about it, saying like, well, he doesn't think that there needs to be an investigation into this. And the last time I heard, Mike Johnson, he talks a Christian game,
Yes, very much so.
and you know, to wit, the Hillary Clinton situation. It's like, no, like, there should be an investigation into this. I mean, just as a basic Christian principle, keeping your leaders accountable is important.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not that I'm suggesting that these people did this out of malice. I mean, I guess it's possible that they wanted to use Signal instead of an actual government app because it was harder to trace. But if I just assume incompetence, which is usually a safe assumption,
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, well, there was a process issue here, and so like unlike the people that were calling for Hillary Clinton's head because she had this email server, it's like, well, no, like she made a mistake and that could be corrected. It's the same thing here for me. It's like, you guys made a mistake, so let's not pretend that investigating anything has to lead to convictions unless somebody was doing it on purpose to leak it to the press. In
Yeah.
which case, yeah, do your thing.
Yeah, I'm going to push back against that. If this was
Okay.
some lieutenant, or if this was like a full bird colonel or a one-star general at the Pentagon, and this would have happened because of them, that person would have been court-martialed immediately. Leaking
Mhm.
classified information, they would have gone to Leavenworth. They would have gone to jail and faced a military trial, right? There would have been real consequences for anybody else up and down the chain of command, except for Donald Trump's merry band. No consequences for them. And that's kind of the part that kind of rattles my cage as a former soldier, is that
Mhm.
there would have been hell to pay at any other level of the chain of command, except here at the top level where they're actually talking about things that put people's lives in danger. And I don't mean just kind of generally, right? Those are F-18 pilots that are going into a hostile zone. The text chain
Yes.
talks about CIA already being on the ground. Those are CIA operatives who now have to fear for their lives because that information is out there. So there are real consequences to this mistake, and it's really not mistake, it's hubris, right? It's
Mhm.
pride to think that even though we have all of these processes to keep this information secure, we have skiffs, we have government level encrypted devices to have these conversations. Why don't we want to use those devices? It's so we can avoid accountability, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. So if you're not okay with what Hillary did, but you're okay with what these clowns did, you're part of the problem. And you're not just an observer of the problem, you're part of the problem. All right, let's move
Yeah,
on.
for sure. I would like to at least give props to the reporter who didn't just immediately out this stuff, like, because
Yeah.
he just wasn't sure. Like, he's like, I've got to be being trolled here. Like, there's no way this is real.
Yeah, and now they're trying to paint him as the traitor. Like he's the traitor. He's the one who has the questionable morals, who has the questionable ethics, who hates the Donald Trump administration. Like this guy has been a reporter and the head of the Atlantic. He's like not the head of the Atlantic. He's been in the media business for 30 years now.
Yeah.
Like his credentials are well understood by everybody inside and outside of Washington D.C. And he didn't get where he got by being a traitor. You know.
No, no.
So yeah, unbelievable. But hey, as long as we're talking about politicians and Christians speak, let's go to the. So here's the way the headline reads. If you're looking at the top of your web browser, to politically conservative evangelicals, why we need to unite. No problem, no issue. A unified church is something I think that is in God's heart, right?
Mm.
It's something clearly communicated in the Bible, that God's people should be unified. But here's what the actual headline is. If you actually go to the page, let's make the most of this Trump administration.
Right. And that's, I mean, clearly and very painfully, obviously, problematic.
Yeah.
And I mean, I like for me, like the first and maybe the most important place where this headline fails is just this assumption that in order to be a Christian, you should be politically conservative.
Right.
And I mean, if you've read, let's say, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, it's pretty obvious that you can't just do that.
Right.
And it's not like, if we vote Democrat that if we're championing that as the true Christian vote, like we're not doing much better.
Right. That absolutely.
But, it's like any Christian needs to like just, you have your priorities, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if we were to bring our Christian values into politics, and like, I guess for me, it's important to say, what is politics, right? At the end of the day, what is politics and what is government? Politics is nothing more than the horse race. How do the Democrats beat the Republicans? How do the Republicans beat the Democrats? What kind of horse trading do you need to do to get your bill passed? And what concessions do you need to make in order to still be relevant? That's politics. That's not government. What is government? Government is very little else than collecting money through taxes, coming up with a list of priorities, and then redistributing that money to coincide with our priorities, right? So if we have priorities, let's say something like, we want to end cancer. We can put money towards that, find all the best cancer researchers in the world, and there's going to have to be in the world because apparently we're not doing that research in America anymore. But we can take that money and put it out there and cure cancer. We did that with polio. We did that with measles. If we want to, if we decide it is a Christian value that freedom matters and we are going to extend freedom, the freedom of Christ throughout the world, well, then we can put money towards helping insurgents topple words is hard, authoritarian dictators, right? It's nothing more than expressing our values through the redistribution of money is all government is, essentially. Right? And so when a Christian writes a political piece, and that political piece has nothing to do with how to use our resources to extend the gospel, to make the kingdom come to earth, right? When Christians stop talking about that, and all they're talking about is how to put down the gays and lesbians, put down Planned Parenthood, put down the liberal Christian pastors. When Christianity becomes nothing more than creating an enemies list and making sure you stamp them out, you've lost the plot. Words is really hard today. Yeah, it's really hard. But if that's all your Christianity is about stamping out the enemy, and by the way, your enemy is not these people, right? Your enemy is Satan. And so, like, we need to get back on track. Find the principles that are in line with the principles that Jesus had and clear away all the other stuff. End of rant.
Yeah. There's, I mean, I'd want to push back a little bit.
Sure.
But not much because there isn't much to push back on. Because like Christians as a body, as an entity, I mean, like that, I mean, we're including, Southern Baptists and Catholics and Orthodox and Lutherans in all this milieu.
Right.
Which, and I could say that just fine, right? So that was hard. But, like there is no concerted voice, like at least with like the Catholic Church, you have like the Pope kind of can set like an agenda for the church's direction.
Yeah.
And so, if the church is, pushing to like, hey, we need to be better about feeding feeding the hungry and, housing the houseless.
Yeah.
Like what can we do as a church to do that? But like once we throw like, politics and, government into the mix, things get janky. And it's like the headline doesn't immediately make me go, oh, well, this is automatically stupid.
Yeah.
because I can parse out the words and be like, okay, well, hey, you know what, Christians maybe should, in their voting and contacting their representatives, they should probably be trying to make the most of any given administration to kind of like advance, you know, as Paul says it, faith expressing itself through love.
Sure.
But unfortunately, once we actually look at the head or the article underneath this headline, it like that all falls apart.
It all falls apart, right?
And and why and and why like these politically conservative Christians can't say like, well, we need to unite with politically liberal Christians and find the common ground, find like the mission that we can all back. It's like
Mhm.
that just it's it's as if that like political conservatives don't like quote unquote big government, right? So they don't want to have the government do all this stuff. But when liberals say, "Oh, we should use government programs to end homelessness and end hunger," then it's a problem. It's like
Right.
it's like they just don't want to use those tools in the toolbox unless it's to enforce a very particular view of what they want.
Mm.
And that's all that I see like this call to unity to do is like they want to push and enforce a very specific kind of Christian worldview that may only be Christian in name.
Yeah. Here's my big question at the end of that whole thought string, which I totally agree with. I think ultimately, if you look further down the argument, the question becomes: once you've put down all your enemies, who's left? I mean, because okay, you put down the gays and the lesbians, and you put down the liberal pastors. Who's left? The last time I checked, my Bible said that I'm a sinner and you're a sinner, and we're all sinners, and all have fallen short of the glory of God. So once you put down all the sinners, who's left to represent the church?
Yeah, not much. I
Not
mean,
much. Yeah.
yeah, how many times have people, sent us emails or made rude YouTube comments like, well, like you're not real Christians, because we advocate for things like, taking care of pregnant women, even if they're single.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Unbelievable. This one, we have a story that's kind of. I just want to hit it real quick, just because it's tangentially related to this.
Mhm.
One of the other big stories before the Atlantic piece about the classified materials took over everything was like we always knew because Trump told us that he was going to deport everybody. He was just going to deport
Yeah,
everybody, and we knew that. But at least they had the good sense in the beginning to say, "Look, we're starting with the criminals. We're starting with the drug lords. We're starting with terrorists. We're starting with dangerous people, right?" And so, like Trende de Aragua, is that right? Trende de Aragua. Gang members were were apparently one of the targeted collection of folks to be um, given the accelerated left-footed fellowship, right, out of this country. The problem when you accelerate things like this and start rounding up people without any sort of due process is you tend to sweep up innocent people in the process, right?
yeah,
And so I'm left to wonder, once again, related to the who's left at the end of the line when you get rid of all the sinners. What happens when you get rid of all the bad people who want to be in this country, and you get rid of all the good people who want to be in this country? Who's
yeah,
left? Who's gonna work your crop fields for less than a minimum wage? Who's gonna work the construction jobs? Like, who's left when you get rid of all the good people just because they don't speak your language or have your skin tone? Like, do Christians not, like, are they not able to think beyond their own mirror? Is that where we're at?
and I would kind of want to say yes to that.
A little bit. Sometimes it feels that way. And it would
Yeah,
feel that way if I didn't personally know people who, in their everyday lives, didn't employ immigrants. That's the part that is so hard to get your head around. It's like, yes, I want Trump to deport all the immigrants except for the ones that I need. Like, what?
Mhm.
Like, do you hear yourself?
Yeah, I mean, and fundamentally, in this country, there is, um, and I also want to say evangelicals because that's just the boogeyman that I have a word for, right?
Yeah. When in
But
truth, most evangelicals use that word to kind of describe the whole, right? If you put together all
yeah,
the fabrics of denominations, that would be the word that they would use.
yeah, but there's a strong sense of like American identity and culture, and
Yeah.
then there's this kind of conflation of national identity with Christian identity,
Yeah.
um, and so it kind of makes what a real Christian looks like look like in a white American evangelical.
Hmm.
Um, and that's a problem because when you confuse your culture as being reflective of a true faith,
Yeah.
then you defend your culture as it is if your faith, as if it is your faith.
Right.
And of course, that's a gross mistake because the faith of Christians in Africa or in Brazil or in Japan are going to look vastly different than anything we know. Um, and that's where, like, I think like for you said the mirror. I think that's where the mirror comes in. It's just like, oh, if it doesn't look like me, it's not what I think it should be.
Right.
And yeah, it's like, and people will say like, well, we can't fix like all the problems of immigrants all over the world or whatever, and that's true. But as Christians, our response should be a lot more measured than, well, we're just going to basically deport everybody.
Yes.
Um, and while I understand when the government says that they want to focus on like the train de Aragua,
Yeah.
um, that does not roll off my English speaking tongue at all.
Yeah, there's lots of vowels like all rammed up together.
Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, let me just say this. Let me just say this. Uh what was I just gonna say? Um Gosh, see, I have these thoughts and then they keep eluding me. Um
well,
oh
I was just
yeah,
gonna say just real quick that like they say that they're focusing on that, but they're not just focusing on those people because you're talking about dozens of people. When you're talking about these gangs, for the most part, they're not operating in the United States, or maybe they're partnering with American gangs
uh-huh.
to do what they got to do. So it's like they want to say that they're going to focus on a minority of this,
Yeah.
when I think the reality is it's a lot broader than that because that's the language we've heard constantly from you know conservative Christians.
Yeah. Oh, here's the last thing I want to say on this. I do believe that our founding fathers were men of faith. That they're certainly men of conviction. Um, and so I take it, I assume that their faith informed their decision to put the rights of the innocent over the rights of the guilty, right?
Mhm.
Making sure that the rights and the freedom of the innocent are always protected at all costs, right? And so I do see it um, as a failure. Not I don't just see it as a failure of policy that we no longer care about the rights of the innocent. Now the ends justify the means, no matter what.
Yeah.
I really see that as a failure, um, to understand the example of Jesus, right? Like God already went the route of a worldwide flood, right? To set all
Hmm.
things right. And there's only so many times you can have apocalyptic events to set all things right.
Yeah.
And then you send Jesus as the ultimate communication of 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 what the kingdom coming looks like. You send this God man who has very little ability to affect anything at a large scale, except to speak out and say this is what is right, and this is the heart of God. And like I said, we he explicitly says things like, you know, don't build your church on the backs of the poor, uh, feed the hungry, uh, house the homeless, clothe the naked. And how we as Jesus followers have gone from that to deport them all is just a huge failure of biblical understanding, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I like theologically what I think you were running into is that you have, people that in spite of the constant biblical talk of God as being, forgiving and, being filled with loving kindness and, for God so loved the world, that's, the created order,
Yeah,
it's like this, like we have a God that wants to forgive, that wants us to be reconciled to him. That is ultimately the gospel message right there. Is that we have the means with which to be reconciled to God. But people that affirm that theology out loud also have a view of God as being an innately punitive being.
mm-hmm.
That God just can't stop himself from punishing people. And theologically, ultimately, what we can affirm about any punishment on sinners, it's the people that refuse to give up a punitive worldview that are the ones that are going to be the ones that are judged. It's the ones that want to embrace forgiveness or to be the ones that God brings into, his, new heavens and new earth.
Yeah,
And it's like if we can stop viewing other people as somebody that, well, you did something wrong, so that you need to be punished.
yeah,
And view them as, hey, look, there's a person that I can, like this person over here that I work with, like they did something bad to me. I have an opportunity now to try to reconcile with them and show them God's forgiveness and God's love. Like that needs to become our motivating
yeah,
thinking again.
absolutely. All right, let's land this plane. We've got a couple more stories, but let's land it on this one. This one comes from the Department of Duh. Okay, so when a billionaire goes on TV and says, "If you elect me, I'm going to deport them all," you believe him. And when a billionaire goes on TV, supported by another billionaire, and says, "I'm going to gut Washington D.C. and I am going to gut the institutions that have served us so well," you believe him, right? And
Right.
when a billionaire gets on TV and says, "I'm cutting everything, everything must go when it comes to the betterment of non-white people," right? If you are not white, we are cutting whatever program. And not only are we cutting the program, but we are cutting off any other school or business that wants to advance the cause of non-white people.
Mhm.
You believe him. So imagine my deep shock and surprise, not, now that churches are starting to realize, oh, that means that our special little ministry for the Qin dynasty, for political refugees from Central and South America, we're going to lose funding. And all the other nonprofits in our area that help us deal with political refugees and help us deal with the economic hardship that comes along with lots of people streaming into our cities and states that we hadn't planned on. All that money has suddenly evaporated, and there are consequences. Imagine my surprise.
Yeah, and it's sad that that should be a surprise to anyone. Um, but again, I think it goes back to what we said earlier about like I look at my side of the argument. I'm like, oh well, we're fine. We're doing all the right things, but not realizing that well, these people, yeah, they were wearing their beliefs on their sleeve the whole time. Um, and that is, of course, why we as Christians shouldn't be voting along strict party lines.
Yeah, but
You know,
my point isn't about the politicians. My point is about these people who didn't think. It's almost like they thought their vote didn't matter, right?
Mhm.
Like I just vote and somebody new is gonna inhabit a really nice palace in Washington D.C. and that's all there is to it. It's like, no, these are really powerful people whose swipe of a pen can make people's lives, like, can improve people's lives or really turn their lives to hell, a living hell.
Yeah,
And they thought that this man child of a president wasn't going to resist the urge to turn people's lives to a living hell. as retribution for not getting elected twice in a row. I just don't. Sometimes I just, no matter how hard I try, I just I can't relate to the thinking. You know, like, hey, I'm part of of a movement, of a worldwide movement that wants to see God reconciled to His people. That is the movement I am a part of. Um, but I keep electing these people who want to see God removed from His people, and I wonder why I can't make the two. I can't square that circle. It's like, why do you wonder? Like, I don't understand why you're wondering about this. You say you believe one thing, but then your actions keep telling us you believe another. So are you confused about what you believe, or are you confused about what you should be doing? I don't understand.
Yeah, my way of understanding it is that, people are, um, you know, they vary on how much information that they want or need in order to make a vote.
Mm-hmm.
And for like a lot of people, they qualify as, quote unquote, low information voters. And that's not to say that those people are necessarily ignorant, or that they're stupid, or that they're selfish, or anything like that. It's just that if for you, like, you have a singular thing that you think is, this is the most important thing, and this has to be my priority as a voter, then you can talk yourself out of believing like the extreme things that you hear somebody say.
Yeah,
Um,
but this is not
because they're
that.
like,
This is not that. These are people who say that I do have priorities. I have spiritual priorities, and I want
"Mm,
to see those priorities made real. So it's not that they're low information, it's that they're selective information.
well,
Right? I'm self-selecting based on what? Off what my family has taught me, based off what my pastor's telling me, based off what Fox News is telling me. So that, yeah, so yeah, I really get I lose my mind when we start talking about the low information voter, because they're not low information. They're their low attention span and their selective attention span.
well, something that I've seen a lot in my life is, people will talk about, a candidate or a celebrity or somebody, right? They'll be like, oh, well, that person is a Christian. And then there's just kind of like this assumption that goes along with it, that this Christian person here is going to then demonstrate everything I think is Christian behavior.
Sure.
And so, maybe it's like when you're talking about selective ignorance, I think maybe that's what you're talking about, is a person goes, oh, well, that person says that they're a Christian and that they go to church every week. Well, now I don't need to know too much more about that. So I can just focus on these things over here. And when they don't do those things in a Christian way, then yeah, I guess you would be surprised by that.
Right. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I'm not
it's
sure.
it's a take, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I would hope most people are smart enough to say, well, anybody can say anything. It doesn't mean it's true, right?
Right.
You can say you're a Christian, but chances are, if you never crack open a Bible, chances are you're not going to have a whole lot to reasonable to say about the nature of God. You know, um,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But yeah, all right, yeah. So that's the week. That's not the week. There's actually more stupidity to go through, but I don't think any of it is of any value. So
Yeah.
this
There's
is
way too much.
yeah, this is Church is Lame. We're here to talk about how the church is breaking America and how America's breaking the church. By all means, click subscribe, share, give us the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Let us know if you think we're demons. We can take it, and chances are we'll have a good joke and retort.
Yep.
We love the pithy, so bring the pithy and we'll bring the pithy back. But if you can't bring the pithy, then please bring an email to churcheslanepodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, go in peace and serve the Lord. Amen.
Amen.